A wall is coming down on a job site today. It was finished 3 weeks ago. Nobody built it wrong. The drawing was stamped. The wall went up exactly as drawn. The inspector signed off on it. It's coming down anyway because of a call somebody made or never got around to making almost a year before there was a wall to build at all. The tear down and the rebuild will run into 6 figures. The original fix back when that wall was just a line on a screen would have cost one person an afternoon. Here is the strange part. If you pulled up that project's budget, you wouldn't find that 6 figures anywhere on it. There is no line that reads money we burned because the right call came too late. It's scattered across the job, tucked inside change orders and overtime and the schedule that quietly slipped. It is one of the heaviest costs on almost every project, and it's the one number nobody bothers to track. So this episode, we track it. We are going to take a real construction budget apart and follow the dollars all the way through. Where they get committed, where they get burned, and why the stage of a project that controls the most money is the stage that gets the least attention. I'm Hania. This is BIM Decoded, Episode 3.
Welcome to the future.
If Episode 1 and Episode 2 are still on your list, save them for after. This one stands on its own. By the time we're done, you will know the exact point on a project where the money is won or lost, and it sits a lot earlier than almost anyone treats it. Let me start with a number that should stop anyone who works in the built environment cold. Between 2000 and 2022, construction productivity around the world improved by about 10%, over 22 years. In that same stretch, the wider economy improved by about 50%, and manufacturing improved by about 90%. So the part of the economy that builds everything we live and work inside has barely moved, while almost everything around it has transformed. And in the most advanced economy, places like Canada, the United States, the much of Europe, it is worse than flat. Construction productivity there has actually gone backwards since 2000. When McKinsey looked at the most recent window, 2020 to 2022, they found global construction productivity fell by another 8%. Here is a detail I find telling. For decades, construction companies spent less than 1% of revenue on technology, less than a third of what car makers and aerospace firms spend. We are one of the least digitized corners of the entire economy. Why does any of this matter for a BIM series? Because this is the water your projects swim in. Every dollar you spend is moving through a system that is structurally inefficient. And if you want to do anything useful about that, the first job is to figure out where that inefficiency is hiding. So let's go find it. Let's get concrete about a single project. On a typical commercial build, the budget splits roughly into 3 pieces. Design, which covers architecture, engineering, BIM coordination, and all the documentation, usually lands somewhere around 10% of the construction budget. On complex work, it climbs higher, but 10% is a fair middle for the sake of this conversation. Construction itself, the labor and materials, the equipment and trade on site, takes the lion's share, normally 70 to 85%. And then everything else, the permits and insurance and management and contingency, fills the gap. So on a $100 million project, you spend roughly $10 million figuring out what to build and somewhere near $85 million actually building it. Now hold those two numbers next to each other and ask the important question. Which of those two investments has more power over the final result? 10 million or 85? The honest answer surprises people, and it's the whole reason the rest of this episode exists. In 2004, an architect named Patrick MacLeamy published a diagram for the Construction Users Roundtable. It's usually just called MacLeamy Curve, and if you spend any time around BIM, you will see it everywhere, often badly explained. So let me explain it properly, because it's the heart of this episode. Picture a line that runs across the life of a project, from the first sketch on the left to handover on the right. Now picture two curves crossing over it. The first curve starts high on the left and slides down as the project goes on. That curve is your ability to influence the outcome. At the very beginning, when nothing is fixed yet, you can change anything for almost nothing. Move the core, rethink the structure, change the envelope. It costs a conversation. As the project moves forward, that freedom shrinks until near the end you can barely change a thing without real pain. The second curve does the opposite. It starts low on the left and climbs steeply toward the right. That curve is the cost of making a change. Early on, a change is cheap. Later, the same change becomes expensive, and past a certain point, it becomes almost impossible. Once the partitions are up and the slabs is poured, configuring a floor is no longer a drawing revision. It is a demolition job. See where those two curves cross. Your power over the result is the highest at exactly the moment the cost of using that power is lowest. That window is early in design and it closes fast. Then MacLeamy drew one more thing. He showed where the design effort actually goes on a traditional project, and the bulk of it piles up late around the construction documents long after the cheap and powerful moment has already passed. His argument was straightforward. Move the effort forward. Spend more of your thinking early while you still have leverage and while changes are cheap, instead of late when you have neither. That shift, moving the intensive thinking to the front of the project, is the entire reason BIM exists. So now we can trace the money to the exact place it gets burned. Across decades of studies, rework, which is the cost of doing something again because it was wrong the first time, runs somewhere between 4 and 12% of total cost of a project. Most of the credible studies land in the 4 to 10 range. On a $100 million job, even the low end is millions of dollars spending building something twice. But the number that should change how you think is not how much rework costs. It is where it comes from. When the Construction Industry Institute studied this on real projects, they found that the deviations driving rework, the errors, the omissions, the late changes traced overwhelmingly back to design. In their data, design accounted for close to 80% of the cost of those deviations. Not the trades, not the people on site swinging the hammers, the decisions, and the missing information from the front of the project. Read that next to the MacLeamy Curve, and the whole picture clicks into place. The money gets spent on site inside that 70 to 85%. But it gets decided in design inside that 10%, back where the leverage was high and the information was thin. The mistake gets poured into concrete on site, but it gets written into the project months earlier at the desk. This is what follow the money really means. The biggest pile of cash sits on site, so that's where every set of eyes goes. But the leverage and the damage both happen upstream in the thin slice of budget almost nobody guards. Now I want to be straight with you, because a curve that explains everything usually explains a little less than it claims. The MacLeamy curve is not new, and it's not a law of physics. Almost 30 years before MacLeamy, a software engineer named Barry Boehm drew nearly the same shape to explain why a software change gets more expensive the later you make it. The insight that early decisions are cheap and late ones are dear is older than BIM. It's older than computers and design at all. And front-loading is not free. Spending more effort early assumes you can know enough early, and on messy real projects, you often cannot. Push too hard, too soon, and you can end up polishing decisions the project has not earned yet. So here is the honest version. The curves is not the promise that BIM saves you money. It's a map of where your leverage is. BIM is the mechanism that helps you act on that map without going broke. When your model carries real information, you can test the change while it's still a question on the screen when it costs a conversation, instead of finding the problem on site where it costs a change order. That's the real mechanism, not the model on its own, the ability to catch the expensive mistake while it's still cheap. So what do you do with this on Monday morning? If you own or develop projects, this is the case for paying for good information early. The 10% is not where you cut. It's where you decide whether the 85% goes well or goes sideways. If you run the build, this is the argument for pulling coordination and the hard questions forward before the trades are standing on site waiting on an answer that should have been settled months ago. And if you are the one in the model, this is your reminder that the work you do in the quiet early weeks, the boring weeks, the weeks when nobody is watching, is the most valuable work on the whole project. You are standing in the cheap, powerful window. Use it. Here is where this leaves us. We have talked about money as if it were the whole story. It is not. Behind every one of those late, expensive changes is a person who saw it coming and couldn't get anyone to listen. The detailer who cut the clash months before the steel was ordered. The site lead who knew the sequence wouldn't hold and got overruled. The money didn't vanish on its own. Somebody upstream always knew, and the project wasn't built to hear them. The money problem is real, but sitting right underneath it is a people problem, and that's exactly where we go next. In episode 4, we follow the people instead of the money. Who actually carries the knowledge on a project, and why the person who could have saved you the most is so often the one nobody listened to. Follow the people. I'll see you in episode 4.